We are in Philippians, so if you want to go ahead and start making your way there, you can. I am really excited to preach today because today, if you're kind of an American history buff, you know what today is. Today is June 6th, and if you know what that is, let me give you another hint. June 6, 1944 was D-Day, absolutely. And I am a big fan. I don't know if you call fan is the right word, but I like all things D-Day. Probably the first time I saw Saving Private Ryan floored me. I had no idea anything like that happened. And, that was 10 years ago or so. And then I was able to read more books on D-Day, to see documentaries and all the movies and all the stuff that's come out. Band of Brothers, I own that. Man, that's amazing box set every man needs to own, I think. And I just really like all things D-Day. Not because it's some weird, thing about death or fighting or anything, but the logistics of the largest invasion the world has ever seen and the world will ever see probably, the logistics of that happening, the courage and the tenacity of those men on the beach. I mean, that is one of the few things in life that will move me to tears, is when if you watch Band of Brothers and you see at the end, they interview the old men, the veterans who lost their friends there, and they'll just start bawling. I mean, these old men who could kill Germans today still, and they're just crying. And I mean, that's something that will move you to tears. And I was able to go to Normandy back in 2002, I believe it was. I spent a month doing some mission work in England, and had a week where I could go down and just kind of do some touristy things and spend a little bit of time in London, and thought, I'm probably never going to be in this side of the world again for a while, so let's go see Normandy. And so I had a great uncle, actually, who was killed in Normandy. And, the beach... The storm on the beach was one thing. That happened on June 6th, but he was killed about a week later because, when they got to the beach, they didn't just, it wasn't like the Germans just gave up and left. They had to push the Germans out of France. And so my great-uncle Thorne, he was killed about a week later, just kind of inland in France there. And I was able to go. I think we got a picture of me by the graveside there. It says Thorne there. That's my granddad's brother. And so my granddad he also served in World War II, but Loy was part of that invasion force. And so that kind of has some special meaning to me, that's the graveyard there in Normandy. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but the graveyard, just thousands and thousands of crosses just everywhere. And it's all the men, a lot of the men are buried there, and it sits on a kind of a cliff that overlooks Omaha Beach. And Omaha Beach is where most of that fighting took place, where the worst of that fighting took place. And it's just an incredible, incredible experience. I got to go visit Pointe du Hoc. If you don't know what Pointe du Hoc is, you need to Google that and look it up. It's a really incredible story. That's the next best World War II movie in my mind. If they haven't made that, I don't know why. But I love D-Day things. Another interesting fact about D-Day is that June 6, today, 1944, 56 years ago today, was the last time a sitting president ever prayed publicly in front of a nation. Isn't that interesting? Last time, President Roosevelt, he spoke a prayer over the radio to the nation. That's the last time a sitting president has ever prayed over the nation. Really interesting stuff. But what I loved really about D-Day and about all that stuff is just as I said, the logistics that had to go in. It wasn't just a bunch of guys, let's all get in a bunch of boats and go over there. It was almost 200,000 people working towards the same mission. And so you had all these little troops who had all their individual little missions that they had to carry out for the good of the greater mission, which was to push the Germans back into Germany and to win the war. And so, it wasn't just, let's get in a boat and go across. It was, the first guys that landed were they were called the Pathfinders, and they were in the gliders. And I don't know if you've seen the gliders before. Actually, Calvin Surrett, who's one of our senior adults, actually flew in one of these. He's got some great stories of flying in those gliders. And so they would be, they had the real plane, and it would be towing a glider. And a glider was basically made of this paper material. It had no engines on it, nothing. And so they would fly over enemy territory. They would detach from the plane, and they would just glide in silently so no one could see them or no one could hear them. And they had tanks in them and jeeps and all the men in there. And they would crash land into a field, and it would be a controlled crash landing where hopefully no one died. And so they would land, and then they would deploy from there to try to fight the enemy. And so those were the first guys to land. Then you had the paratroopers who started about midnight on June 6th, and they had their own sets of troubles. It was horrible weather. The actual D-Day was supposed to be on June 5th, but weather pushed it back to June 6th. And so the paratroopers wanted to land, and they get over there, and the clouds have, played with the drop zones. They didn't know where they were, and they started receiving anti-aircraft fire, and they had no idea where they were at the time, and the pilots were panicking because it was the first time they'd ever come under fire. And so here come, the pilots stepped on the gas. I mean, they were going way too fast, and so the paratroopers would jump out and be hit by the prop blast, and their guns would go flying, and so they would land in enemy territory with no weapons, miles from their jump zone, yet they were able to secure the bridges and the towns and the guns that they needed to, so that in a few hours later that the troops on the beach could land. And so it was just a big concerted effort. And then you get to the guys on the beach, and that's a whole nother animal. I mean, those guys were facing, the beach is long. I've been there. It's not like Panama City. It is a huge, 200, 300 mile long beach, and they're running these hundreds of yards straight into German machine guns. And it was an amazing feat that these guys survived, that some of them survived and were able to secure the beaches, and that was the foothold we got into Europe so that we were able to push them back. And I love the idea that these guys went over there in one mind and in one spirit, and they were going side by side with each other, pushing back the enemy. It's such an amazing thing to see the courage that they undertook. And it just so happens that the text that we're looking at we're looking at this morning parallels so well with the story of those men on D-Day that stormed the beaches on D-Day, and the fact that we actually have a mission as Christians, as Christians on this earth, that we have been called to a mission as well. And we, like those soldiers, have an individual mission that we must carry out in our lives so that the greater mission will succeed. And it's such an amazing thing that the text is going to talk about. You can see that the title is called Prepared for Battle, that we are in a battle this morning. And it's nothing like what those guys faced. It's more of a lifestyle battle. It's more of a battle for the kingdom. Greater things are at risk than just what was for World War II. This is an amazing battle we find ourselves in. But just as each soldier had their own individual mission to help the greater cause, so does every Christian. We have our own unique mission. We have our mission where we live, where we work, where we play, where we have fun. We are called to be missionaries, to push the kingdom of God, to bring light into the darkness everywhere we are. So if you're a worker, if you work on the base, you're a missionary to Redstone. You're a missionary to your job. If you're a plumber, you're a missionary to your line of work. If you're a teenager, you're a missionary to your school. You're a missionary to your campus. Where you live, you're a missionary to your family. You're called to bring the light of Christ, to make God be glorified wherever you are. Whether it's where you enjoy your time, your free time, your playtime, whatever you do, that's where you are called onto your mission. And so, how do we carry our mission out? And what Paul warns the Philippians, the Apostle Paul wrote this letter to the Philippians. What he warns them is that there are distractions to winning the battle. There are distractions keeping us from actually doing our mission, fulfilling our mission. Just as the soldiers on D-Day had all sorts of distractions, they had the planes, the weather was crazy, it was dark, they didn't have their weapons, they had all these different distractions, but they were able to overcome those obstacles and win the war. We have many, many distractions in our lives as Christians that will keep us from our mission if we're not careful. And so that's what Paul is warning to these people. And so the series that we're doing all summer long in the book of Philippians is just verse by verse, chapter by chapter. We're taking the church at Philippi, which existed 2,000 years ago, and the church here in America, where we live today, our context, and looking at those and saying, you know what? They had a lot of things very similar to what we have. They were in very, very similar circumstances as to what we were. They were a country or a city that was plentiful. There was a lot of money. It was a popular place. And so there are a lot of similarities and a lot of circumstances that we can compare between those two. So let's read